In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Flippity Manipulatives for some more advanced techniques using pictures. So we're going to start with one example where I used a picture in a basic manipulatives activity. This is just the Venn diagram background, and students were asked to sort out vocabulary according to whether it related to the French national holiday or American Independence Day, and some of those terms referred to both of them. And most of this was just vocabulary, but I also threw in a picture of each of these flags. So how do you do that? Well, it's actually really simple. If I go back to the Google Sheets where I created this, here are all of the terms that I used. But then for two of the terms, instead of using a term, you'll see that actually what is entered in that cell is an image file. So I just did a search for a small French flag and an American flag. I opened up the image itself and I copied the image address, or you can click on the image, right click and choose copy image address. You want to make sure that it ends with JPEG or PNG to make sure that it's an image file, and you just paste that address in there the same way that you would a term. When you publish to the web and click your link, then it's going to show up in a little box like this, and you can move it around just like you can with any of the other terms. So on the Flippity Manipulatives page where it has the demo and the instructions, there are some detailed instructions there about how to work with images because it is a little bit tricky. So if you go past the 4 steps to the frequently asked questions, there's images about or information about fonts and backgrounds, and then it asks about multimedia. There's information here about how images work. It explains that you can use text or an image in a cell. You can't use both, so I can't have a picture and a word attached to that. It does say that your URLs have to end in, and you have all these options: GIF, PNG, JPEG, alternate spelling of JPEG, or WebP. Here's the problem. You cannot use Google Drive to store your images. You might have pictures saved in your Google Drive already. That would be awesome, and all of those images have their own link, but it doesn't work in Flippity. So there are a few extra steps that you have to go through. The workaround for this is that you can use Google Drawings. So I'm going to show you how to use Google Drawings for this. And just like we do with Flippity itself, what you're going to do with each image, it's going to be its own Google drawing, and you're going to use a publish to the web link. So if it's an image that you can just find online, awesome. Find it online, copy the address, paste it in there. But what I'm going to show you is kind of the putzier method of, I have some images of my own that don't come from the web that I want to use. I will show you the process of how you actually work through that. Images are automatically resized, so it doesn't necessarily matter what size the image is as you find it, because Flippity will resize it. And they do say that smaller images will load quicker. So keep that in mind, especially if an internet speed at your school is sometimes a little bit sketchy. So there is information on this page about how this works. I'm going to show you 2 activities I created using images. This is an activity that students do after they've watched a video. So this video, this little donkey, is named Toto, and this is a video about Toto getting dressed all by himself. And after they watch the movie, students are asked to take these pictures and sequence them according to how they happened in the movie. So this is actually the first thing. Toto wakes up in the morning, and I do have a background that goes along with it. Now where the pictures show up, it's blocked a little bit, so I can actually just drag all of these down and then you can see what it looks like. But these are the images that students have to work with, and their job is to put them in the right order. So Trotro wakes up in the morning, and after that, I believe he looks around for his clothes. He doesn't see any, and so he goes to his armoire to pick out some clothes. And the first thing that he finds that he puts on is his pants. And then after his pants, the next thing is the t-shirt, etc. And so a student's job is to put this in the correct order. So here's what the finished result would look like. So this is the sequence that students would put it in. Now each student would be opening up this link on their device and doing this activity individually, or you could have them do this with partners if you wanted to. The nice thing about Flippity is that it's just one link to send out to every student, and it opens individually for every student. What one person does on their device does not change what anyone else can do or see. So then we would go through this as a class and make sure that everyone has it in the right order. And then there's a follow-up activity to go along with this. In the follow-up activity, my background is now actually those pictures in the order, and then their job is to take the sentences and match them up with the pictures. So they would eventually go through this whole process of matching up sentences to pictures. And this is what they would get when they are all done. And then we would go through those sentences together. So these are separate Flippities that I made. This one is obviously just using text for the manipulatives, but it has an image background. The other one is actually using images as each of the manipulatives, and it also has a custom image background that I made for it as well. Now you wouldn't necessarily have to have that. You could just have a plain background, but I felt it would provide students a little bit more structure if I had arrows and numbered so they knew kind of exactly what they were supposed to be doing, and then in theory everyone's screen should look the same at the end. So I'm going to show you how to create a background or backgrounds like the ones I have here, and I'm also going to show you how we get these individual little pictures that are the manipulatives. So I'm going to go back to my main Flippity page, go to Flippity Manipulatives, and I'm going to open up a new template. And I actually have a different Trotro video that I want to make an image activity for. This one is about Trotro flying a kite. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to retitle this. Okay, and then I always like to retitle this on the bottom as well. There we go. And I'm going to delete all of this information because all of these are going to be images. So I'm just going to be using an image as each of my terms. Now, it just so happens that I have these images saved already in my Google Drive. These were images that I had on my computer. They're just screenshots from the video. So I had these on my computer. I uploaded them to Drive, but I can't just take the link from Drive and put it in Flippity. It won't work. So there's a little bit of a process here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a brand new Google Drawing. So I can just go to drawings.new, and that will create a brand new Google Drawing for me. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert just one of these pictures. So I'm going to go into my Drive and find the folder that contains the part that I need. And here are all of my images. Now, to make life easier, you might, if it's something that has a sequence, you might want to have them numbered or have them named somehow because it might make your life easier later on. But I'm going to start with just image 1, and I'm going to put that in. Now, you're going to see that my image is not the same size as my background. You want your background as much as possible to match the size of your image. You can always make this bigger or smaller, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the size of this according to how this came up. So this is about 5.5 inches wide, and it's a little bit over 3 inches tall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, Page Setup, and instead of this standard size, I'm going to go to Custom, and I'm going to go 5, and we're going to go, let's try 3.12 as a nice random number. So now when I resize, there's my 5, and oh, it's actually a little bit shorter than 3. Well, that's okay. I can adjust it. So I'm going to go back to my page settings, and let's try that. That is still, oh, that's pretty good. I've got a little bit extra on the bottom, but I'm not really going to worry about that. So ideally, you want your picture to take up the whole size. That's going to make it so that it'll be nice and centered in that little box that you eventually have. Okay, so each image has to be its own file. So I am going to call this image 1, and I'm just saving this in my main drive for right now because I'm really just going to be pulling the website from it. And I can't actually use it as it is. Remember, I need to have a web address for this. So I'm going to be publishing this to the web. So image size, I'm going to leave it as medium. Normally I like my images to, be as crisp and clear as possible, but the bigger the image, the longer it's going to take to load. So I'm going to leave this as medium, the default. I'm going to click on Publish. It always asks if I'm sure. Yes, I'm sure. It's going to give me the link. So Control C, I copied that link, and I'm going to go back into my Flippity that I made, and I'm going to paste that web address. So here's my address for that drawing, okay? That Google Docs drawing that I published, not just the web page, but the actual published image, that is what's going to come through in the final version. So I'm going to do that for all of my pictures. The easiest way that I found to do this is I take this basic page, I go make a copy, I call it image 2, and then I'm going to delete the one that's in here, and I'm going to insert my image from Drive. And I'm going to have to search again, although since I know that this picture is also called image 2, oh, look at that. There it is. I found it. I can add it in. Boom. So I'm going to go through that same process. I put my picture in, I stretch it so that it takes up the entire space. I'm going to go to File, Publish to the Web, Publish, OK. I get the address, I copy it, and I'm going to paste that in. And I'm just going to keep doing that until I have all of them in there. Okay, so I have the links for all of my published Google Drawing image files in here. This activity has 13 activities, or 13 images, so I'm filling rows 2 through 14. So I've got all of my pictures in there. Now I need to figure out what I'm going to use as a background. You could just use the basic background and just tell students to put them in a certain order, but I like to have a background that guides them a little bit more. So I'm going to delete all of these, and because I've used this in the past, I already have kind of a template that I created for backgrounds. This is what I used for the other Trotro activity where I had 15 images to use, and so there was kind of a number guiding them for what should go where. What I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this. So I'm going to do make a copy, and we're going to make this a 13 image Manipulatives background. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of these last ones and do some renumbering here. So that bottom row, let's see, we can actually get rid of our yellow arrows here and here. So they'll do 5, 5, and then 3 in the bottom. Now my background needs to be a published image file as well. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go File, Publish to the web. I'm going to publish it. And then I'm going to copy the link that it gives me, and I'm going to put that in the URL. And I can just title this image or background or whatever you want to call it. That doesn't really matter. My options, I definitely want to display them randomly because I put them in order. So we want to make sure that that's random. And then I'm going to just change the font to a font that I like a little bit better. It's almost ready to go, but before we can get the link, we need to go and we need to publish it first. So I'm going to go publish to the web, publish, okay. This isn't the link that I want. I need Flippity to do its magic. So I'm going to come to the last tab. I'm going to click on this link. And here is my finished activity. Here are all of my pictures. Now, once again, because the pictures are kind of big and I could make them a little bit smaller, but it's not really necessary. What I would tell students to do is just, hey, drag the pictures out of the way a little bit so that you can, fill up the first row, and they can even overlap the pictures if they want to really get them out of the way. Normally they're working sequentially, so they fill up the first row anyway. And so this is the part 1 of our activity. Now, the part 2 of this, just like I did with the other one, would be I would have another background that actually has the pictures all in order already, and their job would be to then match up the sentences to those images. So that's going to be a completely separate Flippity file that I'm going to use for that. So that means that I'm going to go back to Flippity and start a new manipulatives. But what I'm going to make sure that I do first is I'm going to take this web address, because this is what I'm going to share with students, and I'm going to save this somewhere in my digital lesson plans or wherever it is so that I have that link ready to go. Now, if I don't do that or if I lose it, it's not a big deal because this is the original file that I created. This is in my Google Drive. I can always search for it. And that's actually why when I rename files, I always keep the word Flippity in there, because if somehow I lose the link to something, but I'm like, oh, I know I made a Flippity for that, I can just search Flippity in my Google Drive, and everything that I have made, every Google Sheets that is a Flippity starter will come up, and I can find that one according to the name. So you do want to make sure that you save this address somewhere. But if I want to make the part 2 of this, I'm going to need to start another Flippity Manipulatives. So I'm going to open a new template for the part 2. So I'm going to make a copy. And actually, while this is making a copy, I just realized I want to rename this. I'm going to call this Trotro et le cerf volant images. So I'm going to call this one images, and then I'm going to call my other one, because we need to rename this too, this is going to be phrase for sentences, because this is the one that's going to have the sentences on. Now, I am going to put sentences in there eventually, but the part that involves a picture is going to be our background. So once again, I'm not going to be using any of these backgrounds, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete those right away. I need to make a background that has all of my pictures on it. So that's going to be my first task. So what I did is I made a blank Google Drawings that is the same dimensions as the screens that my students use. It's important to look at the dimensions of the screens that your students are using, because if you're on a computer and they're on an iPad, or you're on a desktop and they're on a Chromebook, the screen resolution and just the dimensions are probably different. So sometimes when I'm creating things, they might look a little bit wonky on my screen, but I know that they're going to look correct, or they're going to look the way I want them to on my student screen, because that's how I've set it up. So measuring my student screens, they have very horizontal screens. The Flippity area is about 10 inches wide by about 4¼ inches tall. And so that's the way I've set this up. And I did that just like how I changed the image sizes before. I went to File, Page Setup, Custom, and that's where I set my size. So this is my background. Now, I'm going to have, again, 3 rows of pictures, kind of like what we did before. And to help me organize that a little bit, what I do is I use a table to just kind of give myself some structure. So I'm going to go Insert Table, and I need this to be 5 by 3. So it's actually going to have 15 squares. I'm only going to use 13, but I'm going to drag this so that it is the exact size of my whole screen. And then my pictures are going to go in here. Now, remember, I already had all of those images saved in my Google Drive. So I'm going to insert those images from Drive, and I found a fantastic little tool, or a little trick, I guess, when I'm using this. When I go in to find those images, here's my Trotro file, and all 13 images are in here. I'm going to click on Control A, and it will select all 13 of them. I'm going to insert all of them at once. Notice what happens. It layers them all one on top of another. And what this allows me to do, if I keep them all highlighted, is I can adjust the size of all of them at once. So I'm going to grab from the corner, and I'm going to hold down on the Shift key. The Shift key is going to make sure, as I resize, that it stays the same proportions, that it doesn't get super fat or super skinny. And now my pictures here are the exact width of the square, but there's not a whole lot of space underneath. Remember that I'm going to need space for students to put their sentences underneath. So I'm actually going to make it a little bit narrower than the square. That probably looks good. That way there's a little bit of white space in between, and there's plenty of space underneath for the actual sentences. Okay, so these are all of my images stacked on top of one another. Now, I certainly need to be able to move them all individually. So if I grab a picture, I can move that one picture to wherever it needs to go. And in theory, the pictures are supposed to come in the order in which they were numbered, but that doesn't always happen. So what you might need to do is go back and consult what was the order of each of those pictures and look at it again. But then you're just going to get all of your pictures exactly where you want them to be. So now I have all of my pictures in the correct order, and this is going to be my background, except I don't really want this table in the background. That's not necessary. I was just using it as kind of like a guideline to get everything in order. So I'm going to delete that table, and I just have my 13 images on a blank background, and that's really all I need. And I'm just going to call this Trotro et le cerf-volant Flippity Manipulatives background. So I know that that's what this goes to. Now, once again, this is an image, so I need to publish it to the web as an image. I'm going to publish, click OK. There's my link, and this is going as the background for my sentences Flippity. So I'm just going to call it image, and that's my background. So all I have yet to do is now I'm going to type in the sentences that go along with that image, and that's what the students will be matching up. So now I have all of my sentences in my doc. One thing I like to do just to differentiate the sentences from the white background is to do them in a color. So I think, let's see, let's look at our image. There's lots of blue and red, so I think I'm going to use just like a yellow background for all these so that it doesn't blend in with anything else. So there's my yellow background, and I've got my image in the background. I'm going to change it to the font that I like, but I'm going to keep my setting as random for that. So then I'm going to go and I'm going to publish this one. So publish, okay. I don't want this link. The one that I want is right here. I'm going to click on that, and there is my follow-up activity. So again, I would probably tell my students to make the sentences a little bit smaller, but now they can take all of their sentences and put them exactly where they need to go in order to retell the story, move them around a little bit if they need to see what those pictures were on the bottom. So you have two different Flippity activities now using pictures. We used images as the actual manipulatives and an image as the background. And then we did one where we have an image of our own creation as the background, and we use sentences along with it. So I hope this helps you create some awesome Flippity manipulative activities of your own.